Thank you, dear heart. Had to find my mute button. Screen's changed on my phone. Anyway, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. Hope it's an awesome one. I liked Jeannie's little story there about who's in whose time zone. And it brings to mind a really important point about perception, about the constructs of our mind and the world that we see through our minds. And that is that there are an innumerable number of fantasies that are useful. Like time, you know. I mean, it's something we made up. That's why I can be 10 inches on this side of a line and it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And on the other side of the line, 10 minutes on the other side of the line, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, well, how can that be? We're 20 minutes apart. But so it's a fantasy. It's useful. But there's another category of fantasies that literally threatens to destroy us. And that is fantasies that keep us in ignorance and doing behaviors that have a potential for huge amounts of destruction. You know, we're in this modern world and we think we know so much. We're really not that far away from the knuckle-walking apes. And I was doing some research on a science project this morning, and one of the things that they pointed out is that the best of the scientists tell us that a full 95% of the universe we know nothing about. You know, you've probably heard of dark matter and dark energy. What does dark matter and dark energy mean? Basically, it's a scientist saying, we don't have a clue. We don't know what's in there. We don't know what it is. We just know that it is. And the fantasies that so that's a fantasy that can leave us in a lot of difficulty thinking we know when we don't have a clue. But other fantasies based in something other than human life, based in hostility and fear that the mind generates pictures out of that has us believe something that simply isn't true. Like, if you've ever said, they make me mad, he hurt me, she really disturbed me, they upset me. That's all based on pure fantasy. Fantasy being something that in the actuality is not true, but in the constructs of our mind, what in the ancient teachings was called the mind of man, the mind makes it up like it really is true. Now, believing that we know so much when we really know so little, like 95% of the universe, we don't have a clue what's even there. What are the fantasies do we engage in? Like, for instance, we've announced and invited all of our listeners to join us for a New Year's Eve party on December 31st in the year 4949. So our invitation is that you put that on your calendar today and plan to join us. However, if you think about getting to Heartland in 4949, so about 3,000 years, if we continue to work on some of the fantasies that we're currently working on, like, for instance, money's more important than the earth. You know, the physicists, the geologists tell us that, there's a range of understanding, but maybe we've got 100, perhaps 200, probably outside 300 years to keep bumping this thing out of the the ground that keeps us moving around the surface of the earth, and these things called cars and trucks, trains and boats. Gee, are we going to get to 49.49 if we keep working on the fantasy that that's going to go on forever? And the pollution it creates? You know, the politicians and industry are still arguing about global warming. There are no scientists arguing about global warming. Been sown in people's mind that it's a fantasy. But you don't have to look very far to know that on the 2nd of January for it to be, I'm not sure what the temperature is today, but tomorrow here in Bristol, Virginia, it's going to be 68 degrees they're predicting. You got to know that that's just not right. Just not on track. And so if we continue in the fantasy that we can keep pumping that stuff out of the earth and heat our homes and run our automobiles and our trucks and our trains and our boats and our buses, are we going to get to 49.49 to have that party? There's a certain category of people who think that the earth is theirs to consume, that no cooperation with nature is needed. Like, for instance, we talked the other day about the fact that we're starting a national park here on our property. And in that national park, we're going to begin to grow plants that will support as many of the 500 different species of bees as there are in this country, because without bees, our food supply collapses. Without moths, our food supply collapses because they pollinate the food that we have. So there's a fantasy that we can keep, going to the local box store or to the local arborist and buy the Japanese maple and the Chinese whatever and the European this and the European that plants that do nothing whatsoever to support the insect life that supports the whole structure of the planet in terms of its food supply. Pollinates trees and plants and fruits and vegetables. We can't keep living in that fantasy. We need to wake up to what's going on. And though we're limited in our knowledge, we need to start checking out what of our knowledge is actually true. And there's so much of it that is fantastical. And to believe that we can keep certain people in multi-billions of dollars while other people starve and we consume all of the resources of the earth is a fantasy that could kill us. And that the only mind that can comprehend, there are two categories of mind. There's one that says, I'm going to consume, I will support all the profit that the world can make, especially if I'm the one who's making the profit or getting a cut of it, and to heck with the rest of the world. It's exclusionary. It supports I'm looking for the word to use. It supports inequity and insanity. And ultimately, what we're building here, what we're working to build, is an understanding that takes us outside of our fantastical world and through forgiveness puts us in touch with the actual world. That there is a mind in each of us that can comprehend the deeper mysteries of the world, even though we may not understand them, and can be guided to work in harmony with them so that our fantasies don't kill us. And so as we develop that understanding, as we develop that teaching, then our next level is to make it available to enough people that we can shift into a deeper understanding of what it's going to take to carry us successfully and our children and our grandchildren and their children into a world of abundance and aliveness and joy, rather than some of the outcomes based in fantasy that are surely coming down the pike. And one of the Beatitudes, you would know it from the way the Greeks translate it, but one of the Beatitudes speaks about just and fair behavior between men. The selfishness and self-centeredness of those who would like to own the resources of the world and meter it out to somebody else for money. And we say that's got to be a fantasy that doesn't work. And as one does the work of forgiveness, one moves out from the self-centered space. Einstein says this on such, different quote. He talks about, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. If you think you aren't connected to the suffering peasant in, name the country in the world where it's happening, Ukraine or wherever. If you think you're not connected to them, you're living in a fantasy. According to Einstein. Now, you might know better than Einstein. I sort of defer to him because I think he understood what he was talking about. But if we exclude the just and fair behavior between we humans, if we exclude anyone from that, and that is the seeds of our own destruction. And so working toward a mind that functions out of a connection to active present love and has access to actuality compared to reality, reality being the output of the mind, actuality being what's actually going on in the world. There's that Harvard research we talked about that says that in the time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. It's been estimated in that same time frame there are perhaps as many as 20 trillion bits of data available in the actuality. So if that's accurate, we know the 9 bits compared to 10,000 is accurate. The other's just a guess, an educated guess. But if we live in if the actuality, the dark matter world included, is 20 trillion bits, and there are 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity happening in our brain, 10,000 bits of data firing, and we get to function out of 9 bits and the fantasies created by that 9-bit mind, I think we're in big trouble. And so to make a teaching available, it takes the blinders off and allows a space for perception based in truth, based in fact, based in actuality, and having a mind that strongest inclination is toward just and fair behavior, then I think we've got a shot at all being at that party in 4949. And so we're here with that invitation. We're here with the tools. One of the things that has to happen, if what I'm making makes sense, one of the things that has to happen is that more than a few thousand people need to know about, be aware of, and be able to achieve a state of mind that allows us in mass to access that. It's part of why basically every show we ask you to share what you're learning here with others, even though Some people are caught up in some of the fantastical things that men believe. I'm going to tell you, you're nuts to think that we're designed to function based in active present love. There are going to be people who tell you you're nuts. They're the ones who are exclusionary. They're the ones who don't care about the violence, financial, physical, mental, emotional violence they do to others, whatever it takes to exclude them. And to think that, or to live in a fantasy that, well, if this one special group of people survive and thrive and do well, it doesn't matter what happens to the rest of the world, is one of the most insane insanities that exists. So I just wanted to give you a taste of where the thinking is going with this work, and invite you to consider how, if it makes sense, you can be part of the support that takes this wider and wider field. You know, when we finish this show, there's going to be a link on our website. If you go to whyagain.org, whyagain.org, there's a picture of a microphone. Click on the microphone, drill down, and you can download today's show or yesterday's or last week's or last month's or last year's or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5, 10, 11 years ago. Getting ready to go into our 12th year at the end of this month. And you can pass that topic along to someone else. Just, you know, free, easy. Just go in, grab a link to it or download it and shoot it off to someone else. If there are shows that are particularly meaningful, our request is pass it along, make it available. What we're ultimately envisioning is that this level of understanding will become available literally to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And at that point is the point when we start to realize our goodness, though individuals, we're connected, and we start to function out of that just and fair mind. In order to eradicate the dangerous fantasies that we assume or function out of that are just silly and destructive to the whole potential of humanity. So as the new year opens and we start to think about, gee, that party is just a little less than 3,000 years away. Have you put it on your calendar yet? We want you to be there. By that time, I expect that Heartland, instead of being 17 acres, will be, there's a peninsula there that Heartland's on, and it goes out into the lake. That peninsula will all be people of like mind. As we move this teaching forward and more people choose to intensify and deepen their study and their work with the tools. Actually, I should drop the word study because it really isn't about studying. It is about building brain cells, but then utilizing the tools. You know, our app is about using forgiveness. And one of the things to recognize is that language will never take us to the truth, will never deliver the truth to us or deliver us to the truth. All the words I can say, you're never going to hear the truth out of my mouth. You're never going to go back to a book, even if it's that precious book that tells us, you know, oh, it's got it all. You're never going to find a book that through words can give you the truth. It can either take you to truth or deliver truth to you. But what you can do with words is you can hand people a set of tools with which they can come into contact with, direct contact with which they can bypass the fantasies, the hostile, fearful, grief-stricken fantasies in their minds, and come to a direct relationship with truth. But it will come via experience, not via words. And we tend to give words a power that words don't have. Oh, tell me the truth, Michael. Michael's never going to tell you the truth. If Yeshua himself showed up, he would say, I can't tell you the truth with words. But he would say, I can give you a set of tools with which you can come into direct relationship with the truth. Words are just containers. They don't carry truth. They carry meanings, but they can't give you the direct experience. Only the act of collapsing the fantasies of the mind, which is called forgiveness, the act of forgiveness, can deliver to you a direct experience. And at first, it's usually just like a flash, maybe a fraction of a second. But as you use the tools, the space of connectedness and the presence of love in your physiology becomes broader and broader and wider and wider. And that's what we're here to support. So there are my thoughts heading into the new year, and we're delighted that you're here to be part of the conversation and part of the process. Ms. Jean, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
We do. And, well, the chat room is broke today. So hopefully they'll work on it. I sent them a note early this morning that it was given a server error, but so it's not working. However, we do have a hand up, and I just wanted to add that another change that has happened on the website is that under healing, there is now a page called Healing from the Ground Up, and it has an article with a lot of links that Michael has put in there. And then we also have a page called Homegrown Park, where we will be including, what we have learned and what we're doing. And it's got links in there where you can look up homegrownnationalpark.org. You can also look up backyardhabitats.org and welcoming the birds and the beneficial insects and the butterflies and things like that. So we're putting all that out on the website as well, so you can pick that up. And we do have a hand up, and it is Miss
Awesome.
Kerry, 847. You're on the air. Hi.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Michael and Jeannie. So glad to be here.
Well, good morning, young lady. How are you this morning?
Yeah, it's the beginning of a new year, and I'm so glad to be here.
Yay.
I really love what you were talking about, and starting with the climate change comments that you were making, and then going on to how do we shift and change our whole perspective. And one of the things that was really important to me, because I work in natural resources protection and restoration and recreation of ecosystems, was getting in touch with a whole different level. And I did that through getting in touch with my grief over what was happening to the world through a workshop that Joanna Macy did. Some of you might be familiar with her. And when I first was sitting in the workshop, I was like, oh, for God's sake, people, come on, get a grip, I was in the old patriarchal paradigm and of separation. And as I sat and I said, you're going to go through this and just be receptive. And so I did. I opened as my heart opened, and what I realized was that I had this overwhelming grief of what was happening to our planet. And I allowed that grief to be present, and I sat with that grief in recognition. And then I went deeper and took a look at my responsibility in that, because the grief, that emotion that I was allowing myself to feel so deeply, coming out in sobs, really, after that had settled down and I had sat with it for a while, I went deeper, and it was like, so all of this is part of the separation, right, as you were saying. And this myth also of the separation, because there is no separation. But as I sat with it, I recognized the grief of my own patient. And one of the things that your work offers is a chance to look differently, because when we think we want to do some actions in the world to correct something that doesn't sit right with us, and to correct ourselves and our habits and the way we think and the way we act in the world, we're still acting in that fantastical paradigm, within that fantastical paradigm, whether it's time, as you were talking about, whether it's culture, whether it's institutions, and all of those things. So sitting with your tools and being able to access the truth of the reactions that I'm having through grief or anger or whatever it is, and also the truth power. And one of the things that I recognized, well, I recognized many things going through your processes, is that this is not something that I can do alone. I've always had this thing, I have to prove myself in the world, I have to do all this. And that's a whole part of the fantasy, right, that's created. And that this work has to be done in community. So I'm so grateful for your realization of that. And I'm also reaching out to others, because as you were talking about food systems and how our food, for example, has become bereft of not just nutrients, but of energy. And I know people are going to think I'm crazy for this, but there are other things that we can't see. We think we know it all, but there are other forces in nature that work in co-creation, that can work in co-creation with us if we allow that, to bring that whole energy back into plants and into our food systems and into our natural areas that are being so degraded by invasive species and climate change and other pests and diseases. So this is a bigger thing. This is a huge thing, Michael, that you're doing, a huge awareness that you and Jeannie are working on. And it's, I am currently in a place now where I'm getting ready to retire very soon, and I've been I'm in this gap of where my work is next. And
right.
I'm feeling that
What's
there's
the next
a
level of your purpose?
Right, exactly. And there's a level of alchemy that's going on within me, of all the learning and the absorption and all of my experiences that's going to be translated into something else. And one thing I do know is that it's going to involve community, it's going to involve teaching, and it's going to involve people actually willing to go deeper and work on themselves. I have worked with people who say they want transformation in their lives, and they're not yet willing to do the work that it takes. So there is work to do. It can be easy and joyful if we have that mindset around it. We don't have to think of it as hard. It's just life purpose work. And I see the joy that can come out of that and the freedom that can come out of that. Where my work is going to be, it's going to be working with the nature spirits to bring energy back into our natural world and into nature and into the form that we've created here. And whether that's through our food systems, whether that's through our human healing systems, and it all starts for me, it all starts on the level of mind.
Well, I'm with you 200% on that. In fact, if you go to the opening words in the book of John where they tell us, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It's not what it says at all. What it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. That literally what we bring into our physiology in mind literally becomes the chemistry of our structures and of the world. So yeah. I'm with you 200% on that one. And, one of the other insights that for me, you mentioned the food and what people are eating. It's that with the fact that since we moved here to Bristol, we've been doing a lot of gardening, something I've never done in my life and am really enjoying. And what's become clear to me is that you can't grow food on dirt. And our whole commercial food industry is trying to grow food on dirt. And so they have to flood it with chemicals and artificial this and artificial that to try to make it look like food. When the truth is, it's not even food. Most of what people buy in a grocery store is not really related to food because dirt is dead and you can't get life from dirt, and food is supposed to be alive. You have to grow food in soil. And, the world doesn't make a distinction. Oh, well, there's a handful of dirt, same thing. It's not the same thing. Yeah. And it's been kind of a natural progression. And thank you for your support in encouraging us and helping to fund us in getting into the soil course that we did. That's just expanded our understanding on another level. And that's part of what led us to the work. I think I sent you a link to Talamy's video on his project of creating homegrown national parks, and that we actually are getting ready to go out and get a trailer and get some lumber to take a square off of our lawn. It's going to be about 100 feet by 20 feet or so to start with, and start getting the clay and the inch or so of dirt that exists on top of it turned into soil, and planting some native species so that these native insects have a place to feed and reproduce. I had no idea that the reproduction of so many of the pollinators depends on just one single plant, that they can't reproduce otherwise, and just how the whole system, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, about the whole system has been commercialized. You take all the native plants here and you call them weeds and you export them to Europe, and they pay a fortune to buy them, these plants from America, and plant them, and then you take what's in Europe and you call them weeds to the Europeans, and you bring them here, or from Africa or China or wherever, you bring them here and you call them exotics and you sell them to people for a fortune. It's all about making a buck. And so it's like that's been a whole new awareness. It's dawned on me with the study of soil and food, and recognizing that, and that we need to wake up to the fantasies that literally can destroy us, whether they're from hostility and fear right on through to the way we handle the earth. And I just sent you a chart. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, the next step for me is co-creation, not thinking that I'm just doing this for the earth.
Right.
But that there are a whole series of nature divas and nature spirits that work with the energies of the earth so that we can create the form of the carrot through the seed. Seed can create the form, but it can't bring the energetics of carrot. That's the co-creation with all of these other energies that are swirling around with us. And I am learning this. I started out by thinking, oh my gosh, when I'm going to do a restoration on a preserve this group that I work for, this not-for-profit, I'm going out there and I'm cutting and destroying and burning, slashing and burning invasive species, invasive trees that take over and destroy the soil chemistry, that provide no food that any of our birds or animals like, but each of those plants in itself has a conscious awareness. And if I just go in and slash and burn, so I'm not honoring their conscious awareness.
Right.
So even though I'm going in and then I'm reseeding and encouraging the native seed bank to flourish, to bring balance back, I'm not doing it in co-creation with anything. I'm just going out there in the old patriarchal sort of paradigm of I can do this myself, and just go out there with no thought about all of those invisible things. So I'm, in a sense, still working in my fantasy. Until I come to true co-creation, if I was in true co-creation with the nature energies, sit on that prairie that's been invaded by invasive species, and I could co-create on the level of mind. And that is something that's blowing me away big time. And truly honoring all of those spirits. So I am having my mind opened in a whole new way, that
Sweet.
us living in our current, like what I was saying, when you're trying to do something new, but you're always working within a culture, a way of thinking, whole systems that are set up to support that way of thinking, that I need to find that community of people that I can work with. And, I think this new way that you and Jeannie are moving forward in your thinking is absolutely exciting and really, really meaningful to me, at least.
Sweet.
Yeah, and how do we do that co-creation? How do we do that? What's the next step?
Well, it's interesting. The Course in Miracles talks about the fact that there is one and only one single-edged sword, one thing that you can use that cannot be turned against you, and it's forgiveness. And it's removing from this whole genetic history of perception and constructs based in that perception. For instance, my mind says to me, as you said when you came on, I have this grief about how I've participated in what's going on in the world. And my offering is that the grief that ultimately needs to be resolved isn't grief that you've got for what's going on in the world or your part in doing it, but rather is just grief. One of the reasons I'm starting to realize, one of the reasons that the perceptual mind exists is to make up stories for why things are the way they are. I'm angry because of what you did, what I started out with, the fantasies. You made me afraid. And so if fear comes up in me, and I live in the world mind, my mind makes it up that, well, what you said is what frightened me. You've done that. And I'm now in a whole fantasy that I can't resolve within that fantasy. Like Einstein said, you can't resolve a problem with the mind that created it. And my offering is that, go ahead.
So are you saying, I think what you're saying is that my fantasy now is that I created it, so I'm blaming myself. I was part of the creation of that. So that I'm going into self-blame rather than just the forgiveness.
Yeah, and that's always a reflection of a power person dynamic. So if I'm angry, I'm not angry because I'm angry because there's anger in me. If I'm sad because there's sadness in me. Whatever it is, I'm experiencing it because it's in me, and my mind will make it up that it's the fault of 1,000 different things. And that keeps me from truly accessing and healing what's underneath it, because you can bet that the kind of grief that you've accessed as you become acquainted with what's happening in the natural world that you're working in, you can bet that grief didn't start with you. It can end with you, but it didn't start with you. I bet if we went back and were able to have a conversation with mom and dad, and grandma and grandpa and great-grandma and great-grandpa and great-great-great-great-great, the grief that each one would have, they would explain with the circumstances going on in their lives. But in fact, the grief isn't a result of the circumstance going on in their lives. It's a result of the fact that there's grief in them. There's the mind energy of grief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's where I see the genius of Yeshua coming in saying, now, here's what you have to do. In every circumstance, you have to collapse the construct of your mind that's making this story up about I am this way because of this. You have to collapse that. And when you do, the thing that drives that whole process is goals. You'll notice that, until you became aware of a goal for, let's say, the prairie, there was no particular feeling one way or other about the prairie. You went and looked, well, oh, that's pretty, or that's ugly, or whatever it is. But as you became aware and had some goals around it, notice that when you clicked into the right goal that accessed your grief, then your mind generated a picture that said, I've got grief because of this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to me, Yeshua having the genius to say, goals drive the mind to create false constructs, fantasies that keep us out of the real healing place. And when we, in the core, for years I taught for a century, his Aramaic forgiveness and never understood why and how it works. But now what I'm realizing more and more is that I cancel a goal, not because there's anything wrong with the goal, but because when I load it into my mind, it accesses my generational patterns that need to be healed, and it makes it up that it's about something out there. And I never get to it directly as long as I believe that, but when I cancel the goal and collapse that construct, the underlying, it collapses in on itself so that we get access to the underlying dynamic, which might be, 20 generations old, might be the real root of the construct. 20 generations ago when the family was out on the prairie and, were struggling and had built a farm and a fire went through and destroyed the fields and the house and the barn and everything, and the loss and the grief that was unresolvable moved from generation to generation to generation to generation, and it comes up again and again and again. But as long as we're stuck in this perceptual mind, it'll always make up a story about how it's about something other than the fact that it's in me. And what I want to do is keep collapsing into and breathing into what's in me, accessing it directly and bringing it forward to the presence of love, so there is dissolution and transmutation of that energy. And then I get to open to the next level of, oh, this is what needs to be done next. The next level of pure guidance based on actuality rather than constructs of my mind.
Oh, this is great. I see a few worksheets in my future here, and this is what I'm looking for. A few more worksheets in my future. So, yeah, this is what I was looking for, that pure awareness of the form my purpose will take. Just some certainty, and I think not something I need to force or make lists about. It's something I need to do worksheets on.
And when I get to the point where, if you remember the chart from Laws of Living, where we looked at the senses that go along with the mind and body, and then there are a similar set of faculties in the true dimension, the spiritual dimension, and when we start to be able to acquire information directly, then that's when we can go directly to the plant and know exactly what it needs and exactly what our part is, if there's any part at all for us in interacting with that plant or that person or that climate situation or that whatever it happens to be, will have direct access from being, from contact with the actuality, the 20 trillion bit world that will instruct us, rather than the 9-bit mind that says, oh, this is what it's about. And to just remember to keep collapsing, and each time I do collapse something that's based in pain of any kind, any form of hostility or fear, I get to drop into that hostility and fear directly as love, which is what resolves that hostility and fear-based mind energy and frees me from it, literally forgives it, removes it.
Thank you.
Breathing with you.
Yes, I just took a deep breath.
Got it.
Very powerful work.
Well, and more powerful for each one of us that decides to join and say, okay, let's go for it. So thank you for joining, and thank you for being part of the process, for enhancing it, supporting it, expanding it. And, ultimately the commitment is every mind, heart, and being on the planet, so that we can play in the real realm. It's like, to me, it's exciting when I think about how close we are to still being knuckle walkers, a hostility and fear-based world that goes on, whether it's, personally or, country, intercontinental, whatever level it's on. When I think about how close we are to knuckle walking in all of those regions, and that, we're designed to be functioning out of the pure presence and awareness of love, and that the pathway to achieving that is the removal of generations and generations. That story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, was not a story about a hot, sandy place, 35 square miles in size. It was about a state of unconsciousness. And when you read that passage, it says, here's what they had to do to get out of the desert into what they called the promised land, which to me is the land of conscious co-creation. To get out of the desert, the old generation had to die off. It didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held within this structure that keeps showing up as construct after construct about something outside of us have to be removed to get out of that unconscious place and into a place of full conscious awareness, where we are conscious co-creators of our lives and are functioning out of the whole, out of, I think, this latest picture that's come out of, it's been shown around a lot in the media, of these nebula and these universes that are just like, the whole shot is, what looks like star after star after star after star, and then you find out that each of these things that look like stars are really whole galaxies that are billions upon billions of stars. And I think we're designed as humans, I think we're capable, and are ultimately capable of fulfilling our purpose, of comprehending that, of functioning within that. And people are still walking around in sympathetic dominance, in survival mode, struggling, fighting, playing a game that isn't even relative to what we're here for. And when I look back at 2,000 years, and I look at all the places I've looked over the years for where are the tools, where are the solutions, this man 2,000 years ago said, here's what you do. Got a goal that's bringing a construct up in your mind that's got some sort of pain to it? Shabag, cancel the goal, collapse that, drop into the next level of healing. It's like just monumental. So delighted to be traveling the path with you, young lady.
Much love to you both.
Accepted and appreciated and returned. And it feels like just a moment of stillness is appropriate. Go for it.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if Magda's hand's still up from where she talked to Dr. Tim, but I'm going to turn her microphone on and see. 828, Magda, okay. You're on the air.
I think Kerry wasn't quite complete.
Hello.
My Paul. Hey.
Did you have another thought to share, Kerry?
No, you're good.
One second, Marcus. Okay. Magdalena, how are you, young lady? Stick with us.
I'm good. Happy New Year to you. My hand is still up from Dr. Tim, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to say Happy New Year.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm excited about the prospect of what's opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds pretty fantastic. And we are having a lovely opening here, too. We are in the midst of sorting and getting rid of things we don't need or want, tossing away and giving away and all of that stuff. So there's a cleansing going on. It's wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. So,
well, holding you in our hearts.
Thank you. And we hold you as well and are very grateful for your beingness, both of you.
All right. Appreciate you. Blessings.
Mm-hmm. Blessings to you, dear. Bye-bye.
All right. So, Kerry, did you have another thought for us?
No, not. Well, I was just going to say that New Year, this concept, it's a like time. It's really meaningless. It's another day. The sun comes up again. However, we've created this construct of a new year in our minds to be able to start fresh on something. It gives us an opportunity to consciously take a look at how we want to shift our being and our awareness into a new phase. And it kind of, flows into the solstices and those planetary energies. And I just also want to, my wish for everyone in this new year is that opportunity to go deeper and look at co-creation in a new way, in a new form, and to deepen our relationships with each other. So thank you very much for all that you do.
Okay. Well, feeling the deepening and appreciation for everybody that joins us every day that you do. Pass the message along, and everybody create the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an awesome gift to give the world. And the world's in need of it right now. Blessings. Bye-bye.